what was found back in those days. Whatever you see or choose to believe, the story's still told. One day we'll know. Under the sun, another one.
Texas is a land of stories. The deeper you dig, the more you find. In 1929, along this very creek, not far from this location, 4 workers digging gravel for the local brick company in Malakoff, Texas, made an astounding and unusual archaeological find. One that to this day continues to spark debate as to its age, meaning, and its very authenticity.
Alright, so we get there, 90 seconds of small talk. Hey, would be a convenient place for us to interview you, and set up a tripod or two, set up the cameras, and sit him down. And so right up here on Cedar Creek yesterday, got out, hiked down to the creek, and it's all I could do. Back for Corsicana last night, not to stop and for a hike down to that creek looking for stuff.
This area, it's got a vibe to it.
I think with the Trinity right here, there were lots of ancient inhabitants that lived in this area. So you're a, regular Joe with a regular job. What possessed you to say one day, I think I'll buy some gear and make a documentary film on an archaeological find?
The biggest lightning bolt that hit me was after I had read a little bit about it, and found out just how little information there is. What attracted me to it was nobody else would be interested in it. Pete, now there's any number of people who want to sit around and talk about it. A legitimate researcher or archaeologist won't touch it, mainly because of what was found, the suspicious things that were found, which are completely legitimate. But this is something that we are immune to the radioactive contaminants that
they don't want on them.
Researchers are afraid of.
Right, sure, yeah.
You think about that. People lived here 15,000 years ago where I'm walking. There was a village. I find that one of the most fascinating. That's as fascinating as like these pictures that the new telescope is sending back and stuff. That is, looking backwards is just as interesting to me as looking outward. When I'm at the Woodlands Mall, I'm 10 minutes from where there was a known large thriving early American settlement thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. I just turns my crank, man.
But to understand how Malakoff came to be what it is today, we need to look back at its origin. Quarrying gravel in the early 1900s was no easy task. It was back-breaking work, even for the strongest. But Mr. Bartlett, the owner of the Malakoff Brick Company, had selected individuals from the community he knew were up to the task. Enter the Morgado family. Indalecio Morgado and his family were immigrants from Cuba who settled in Malakoff and quickly established a presence and reputation in the town for being quality builders and hard workers.
I mean, look at the number of arrowheads alone at the Pierce Museum. What are there, 100,000 there, she said, or something? Call Brad Bullock.
Calling Brad Bullock. Mobile.
Hey, so I don't know how close you are to being ready, but don't get in any hurry. I heard from Pat Isaacson, who heard from Tommy. Him hauled around with her, she said, and said, hey, I didn't really know the Morgados as well as some people, which he told me yesterday. And, well, he flat out just said, I don't think I can help you boys.
Oh, man.
However,
Okay.
he said that let me tell you who you need to talk to, and that's Mr. Bill Green. So apparently there's a guy named Bill Green. He is 92, and he was much closer friends with the Morgados than even Tommy. And I have reached out, and they are expecting us at noon for an interview with Bill Green.
The team heads for a meeting with a longtime resident of Malakoff, Texas, named Bill Green, who was one of just a handful of surviving individuals who personally knew Indalecio Morgado, the man who discovered the first Malakoff stone head.
Well, we are wanting to kind of focus on the Morgados.
They worked together in the cement business, you know, building things like that. And we, you know, knew them pretty well as far as just knowing them.
The Morgados are the ones who are credited with actually finding the first head. Now that was in 1929. How important was it to the community?
Well, I think it stirred up a lot of curiosity, you know, everybody was interested in it.
This just in, 3 crudely sculpted stone faces dug up in Henderson County, Texas. What is being called the hoax of the year in Texas has just come to light. Dr. Sellards considers this image probably the most important find that has been made in Texas. As a matter of fact, the finding of this crude piece of art is not a hoax by any means, but is a strange reality. The Morgado brothers, one of them, while examining the stone, casually brushed his hand over the surface.
I find it difficult to find any motive that I can buy into for forging the Malakoff heads in the early 1920s. When I look at Morgado and his, his reputation, the things he accomplished, the things he did, he built half the town. I just don't see that as someone that would, I'm going to pull a prank on everyone. It just doesn't fit. It doesn't.
The guys who actually said they found the heads, they swore to it. They were evidently challenged on it, recorded an affidavit. They were not men with a flaky reputation or anything like that. They had nothing to gain and everything to lose for lying about anything. And they set their hand to say that they found this as it looks and where they said, and and they did not elaborate. They just said, hey, we found this and we found it just like it is.
This, I for many years, I didn't even know this house existed, mainly because it had sat empty for so many years. and all of the weeds were over 6 foot tall. You could not even see but just the very top of the house. And so one Sunday afternoon, we're just tooling around, and my husband said, let's stop and see what's here. So we came through, parting all the weeds and getting our way through to where we could get to the house. Enjoyed it. We then went around to the back. This house has a basement, and houses in this area do not have basements. So there was the old trap door down into the basement, and my husband just had to open it. And we had had a great deal of rain prior to it, and he threw back that basement door, and the only thing we saw immediately was the bottom of somebody's feet. We jumped like we had been shot. We then snuck back up on the house, and come to find out someone had thrown a mannequin down in there.
The so-called Bartlett House, with its elaborate architecture and ornate grounds, was known for its beauty, and even boasted a flat roof on which Mr. Bartlett would host grand parties for the town's elite. He even used a one-of-a-kind yellow-colored brick for the construction, never to be produced again. The home was known for its beauty, and times for Mr. Bartlett were good.
My goal, one of my early goals, research-wise, was to find every single time that Malakoff Man was found in print, anywhere. Art books, history books, family history books. Anytime you mention the Barrett house and head number 1 are like intertwined. I would dare say we've got the definitive collection of written material on the Malakoff Man.
The Malakoff Man stone heads are now housed at the Pierce Museum, located on the campus of Navarro College in Corsicana, Texas, about 20 miles from where they were originally unearthed.
So behind you we have these these stone heads, sometimes called, I've heard them called Malakoff Man. And who owns these heads currently?
The college, Navarro College owns them. The one in the middle, what we call head number 2, was given to the college several years ago by Mary Love Sanders, who's a local lady here in Corsicana who inherited that head from her I think it's great aunt and uncle. Yes, her great aunt and uncle, who were the bishops who owned the property where the heads were found. And that head was the only one of the 3 that the Bishop family kept and kind of passed down to her. The other 2 have been for many decades at the University of Texas. The number 1 head and number 3 head that were at UT, head number 1 was donated by the Bishop family shortly after it was discovered. Somebody contacted UT and they came out to look at it, and they said they would like it to study. And this head wasn't discovered till 1939, and that's because it was discovered as part of a archaeological dig that the University of Texas completed at that site with the support of the WPA.
I'm Catherine Turner Pearson, and I am a registered professional archaeologist, and I own Central Texas Archaeological Resources.
You've looked at a little bit of the paperwork and the reporting and the photos of the Malakoff Man heads. Right. What's your knee-jerk reaction? Is it an oddity? Is it something that you'd want to take a closer look at?
Well, I would never, I think all archaeologists, when you first see something that's never been seen before and has been found not in situ, not in place, by non-archaeologists, your first reaction is to be very skeptical. But I've also learned enough working with farmers and ranchers and avocational archaeologists to also be open-minded. So I don't see why it couldn't be possible that it's a legitimate artifact.
Taking the side that it's a fake, what's your experience with fake artifacts? Why do people do that, or is that very common?
Wow, it is actually pretty common. Sometimes because they want to sell the artifact, and the fake artifact, and so because they want to sell it to someone, they're hoping that people will think it's an authentic artifact, and therefore be worth obviously more money than something that's not real. Other times, people want some sort of a fame and glory for finding something special. There are also people who are trying to find artifacts that will fit their own view of the world and when man walked on Earth. There are people who fake some artifacts to try to make it look like man walked with dinosaurs when we know they didn't. I think.
Where are you on when the first modern humans were in Texas?
Well, we keep pushing the dates back. I mean, we know they were here without any doubt 15,000 years before present, 15,000 years ago. And we keep pushing that back and pushing that back. Personally, I think one day we're going to find that humans have been in the Americas, probably South America. I'm betting 30,000 years ago. I think it won't be that long before we can say confidently that we'll have enough evidence to show that humans have been in Texas 20,000 years ago. Science is getting better. And then also I think some of the reasons we don't have more really old sites is because we don't dig deep enough. My team recently found a site that we know is between 10,500 and 11,000 years before present. Is there anything below that? We don't know yet. We'll find out. But we have 3 occupation levels. The top one is 2,700 years before present. There's another occupation below that. There's a little space of nothing, and then there. We don't have a date on it yet. But that lowest one, we've gotten 2 dates between 10,500 and 11,000 years before present. Okay.
So how common would it be for an artifact if it were fake? And quite frankly, Brad and I, we don't take a stand. We don't know if the Malakoff Man artifact is old or something that's been augmented. How common would it be for a 100-year-old object to be something that was a hoax or a fake, yet still be debated and housed in a museum 100 years later? Or by that time, do those things usually get filtered out and everybody kind of gets on the same page?
Oh, there are artifacts that have been since archaeology began
that are still disputed.
They're still disputed.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
There are some very famous ones.
Okay.
A lot of them in other parts of the world, to be honest. But oh yeah, there's some very famous ones that are being disputed.
Back to modern man in Texas. What were they doing 10 or 11,000 years ago? What do you find in these sites?
I think, for a long time, archaeologists thought that the earliest people, the Paleo-American people, the earliest people we have here, we thought that they must have just hunted and gathered, and life was rough. And we're now beginning to see evidence that that's not so, that maybe they had a lot more leisure time than we think. There are parts of Texas, in central Texas, that was like being in the Garden of Eden. I think we are now seeing evidence that by looking at like the points they made, and the artifacts that they made out of stone, which around here usually it's chert, that they were making, they put great workmanship into it. Things that took a lot of time. We see evidence that they cared about what they were making, more than just making it functional. They were putting great pride in their work. So I think those type of things we're finding. There's a site close to where we are right now in Central Texas, the Galt site. I know National Geographic said it's the most important Clovis site in the world. I was lucky enough to get to do some work at the Galt site and have been there. They have found at some of the deepest levels with Paleo-American people there, stones, small stones, pebbles, that are incised with obvious patterns.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's art.
The guy who discovered the heads was named Indalecio Morgado, and he was a Cuban immigrant, fought in World War I on the American side, decorated, came back to Texas, and he and his brother Teo Morgado, they were the ones who built the Bartlett House, but they also built several of the still standing buildings in Malakoff.
And here we are. It's a story. The story goes that the man who originally found it took it home and for a length of time had it as a doorstop at his home, which I thought was absolutely hilarious.
Morgado's working for Bartlett, James Bartlett, while he finds the head. So the story I got that differs slightly from what Pat was saying is the workers got it and just put it on his porch. Some accounts say
At the store or at the Bartlett house?
At the Bartlett house. The Bartlett house was being built. They were actually working on it. And so they just put it up there, and I think they may have put a hard hat on it or something.
Academic scholarly methodology demands that you have a methodology, right? And so when you find something like Malakoff heads, even despite that we know almost nothing, we are bound by, well, where's it found, depth, what's the context, what else is found with it, is there anything else like it? And you have to go through that checklist because that's what you're bound to do. And you may be completely wrong at the end of the day, but you've got a methodology to follow. Otherwise, it's just a free-for-all. I'm John Knight Lundwall. I have a doctorate in comparative myth and religious traditions from Pacifica Graduate School out of Santa Barbara, California. That's the Joseph Campbell School of Comparative Myth.
If you said these Malakoff heads might date to, if you said 15 to 20,000 years BCE on these Malakoff heads, I wouldn't flinch.
I'm John McHugh. I have a master's in archaeology from Brigham Young University, with an emphasis in both Near Eastern archaeology and Native American archaeology, especially the region of the Southwest. So when you think of what we would call Homo sapiens sapien, us, a little after 100,000 years ago, archaic Homo sapiens, people that look a lot like us move out of Eastern Africa. They move up into the Middle East around Israel, and then they show up also in Southwestern Asia. That migration continues, and by 60,000 BC to 40,000 BC, you also have people living in, it would be northeastern Siberia. And that becomes crucial relating to the Malakoff heads because Beringia appears between about 30,000 and 20,000 BC. So you have a modern human presence in Beringia, which is the land bridge between Siberia and Alaska, and that's there between 30,000 and 20,000 BC. So, and that's pretty very well established. Those dates are pretty well, nobody's going to argue with that.
I know earlier you said that as the director of this museum, when you talk to people about these heads, you present the 3 or so different theories.
I think there's a case to be made for all 3. The first one being that they were created by ancient people in the Paleo period, maybe up to 15,000 years ago, based on the animal bones that they found in those pits. The second theory, which is that they were created 2,000 or 3,000 years ago by an early Native American tribe. That era of Native Americans was interested in art. They were carving heads. And then the third theory is that they're really just geological oddities that were augmented by the quarry workers who found them. As we tell them all the different theories about the heads that have come up over the years, and we let the visitor decide for themselves.
Are the carvings made by human hands or natural forces? If made by humans, then by whom? And why did they carve them? When were the heads carved? How long did it take? And what types of tools were used to carve the stones?
Then Mr. Bartlett came by one day, saw the head. He was more of a visionary, and he saw that head as something of value, not actually monetary value, but value to this area. And so he got a hold of a friend in Austin who contacted some more people to come up and take a look. And this, to me, cinched what they were. In that original dig, they found the bones of mastodons, camels, horses, and sloths as big as steers. And sloths as big as steers. They can't be made up. My personal feeling, if those three heads were found, there's a whole much more down there. It's under Cedar Creek Lake at this time. How possible? Now, if they could now today, with the equipment that they've got, verify that they date to pre-Ice Age, then they might go after it. But they're going to have to prove it before anybody's going to invest their money.
So, as I recall, one of our goals early on was to try to see if there was a way to visit or get to the location where each head was found. So, I mean, we've addressed a lot, but what's the plan on that?
1 and 2, I think, are underwater right now.
Like under the reservoir?
Yes.
Yeah.
The bottom.
Well, I hate to say it, but you're the diver.
From the beginning of the investigation, a primary production goal was to inspect the actual quarry sites where the artifacts were discovered. USGS maps clearly indicate where the original quarry was located, only to be submerged in 1961 with the creation of Cedar Creek Reservoir. Here we can see the creek bed where Cedar Creek ran prior to being dammed up in 1961. It is now submerged under nearly 60 feet of lake water. And here is the location of the quarries. The topographic map denotes the quarry walls along the banks of what was once Cedar Creek. Although the topographical maps of the reservoir show the rough location of the original site, an attempt at a visual inspection of the quarry will require boats, divers, sonar equipment, and an unmanned submersible vehicle. A team was assembled to simultaneously record measurements while the dive team attempts to capture images of the quarry itself.
But yeah, I mean, when you think about, even today I told the story, I know I get it wrong, about, I told my friend Brad, you need to come walk the rivers with me.
You said, I am looking to put together a 3 to 4 day canoe trip on the Trinity River near Malakoff, and I can dig up that email if needed.
So I said near Malakoff? Mm-hmm. I wonder
No, you said near Malakoff, and you said that's where the Malakoff Man.
Oh, okay. So I had already.
You mentioned Malakoff Man. Okay. And I will absolutely, totally. I have 2 confessions to make. Confession number one is I thought, just the way you worded it, Malakoff Man was kind of some kind of skunk ape Sasquatch type thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
Hairy
confession
beast
number
that lives in the wilderness.
Confession number two is I was down for that. You know.
Did you see the one at the library? No, I'm talking about down in Malakoff.
Oh no, I didn't know they have. Is it one of the replicas or something?
I believe they have the head, one of them down there.
We'll have to check that out. That's
So when we bought the house from Mr. Andrews, the house was the Malakoff Museum, and our desire was to save the artifacts. We didn't want all that just to go away, so we purchased the building on the corner there. It was called the Thompson Building. We're restoring it now, and that's where the museum's going to be replaced. So all the stuff is stored here, and as soon as we get the building done and finished, the museum will go back up.
This is a storage building put in place by Lisa and her husband Wes, because I had so many items in the house that would actually go to the museum, and their desire was to save everything that was in the museum. So the Malakoff men are very safely behind the chairs, and they're in a glass case and being very well taken care of.
And where did you get those replicas?
They were given to me by one of the ladies who worked for the Texas Museum in Austin. She felt very sorry for me because I was unable to get the real ones.
They're kind of stacked. We move them out for events.
It's been so long since I've been in here. I know. I honestly do not remember.
There's another one hiding back in there.
I just know everything's going to be new.
Right. We're not going to go, oh, I forgot about that. Okay, this is one that was upstairs in one of the rooms that we put out here later. It's not actually in the case. But,
oh yeah, they made a whole bunch of, made, well I said a whole bunch.
This was an extra.
They made 3 of that.
They're really heavy. Super heavy.
Oh, that's head number 1, yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
That was a plaster of Paris type one there.
To give you some ideas to the locations in and around Malakoff where this all took place, take a look at this map. Here is Malakoff, and here is the location of the Bartlett House and Mr. Bartlett's Brick Company where the Morgado brothers worked. If we zoom out a bit, here you see the location along what was then Cedar Creek where the stone heads were unearthed. Cedar Creek was dammed up beginning in 1961, and the location where the stone heads were found now rests at the bottom of Cedar Creek Reservoir. And here is Dallas, the closest large city to Malakoff, Texas.
What would you say to those who look or examine the stone heads and say, I don't doubt that rock is 15,000 years old or 20,000 years old. What I do doubt is that it was carved back then. But others believe that the carving took place in 1929 when the guy pulled it out of the ground.
I would very kindly, with a smile on my face, tell him to please come to the Malakoff Museum and let me walk him through all of the paperwork that is connected with those heads. I truly think I could change his mind. It's true, it's there, and what I think that it was used for, people lived, there were so few populations at that time, and they lived on the Trinity River. The Trinity River back in those days was a huge bluff onto Trinity River. They had to have a way to let people know they were there because the Trinity was their highway. Those heads, all 3 of them, have holes in the bottom. I do believe they were set on stakes, and they were set at the edge of the bluffs so that people coming up and down could know there was somebody else there.
Unearthing stone heads in Texas is not isolated to just these finds near Malakoff.
Can you tell me a little bit about what this is that you found and where you found it? And my understanding is that you were near a town called Ty, Texas. Is that right?
I was actually in the town of Ty, Texas. I was renting a house over there from a man, and I had found some interesting rocks and was directed to the Merkel Rock and Mineral Society, where I became a member of it and was studying about the rocks around the area. I got permission to dig in my backyard where I was renting to look for more rocks. And at around 6 foot, I pulled up a bucket and was sifting through because it's really hard ground, and this little dude was in it. I have asked around and no one knows anything about it, where it could have come from or anything, and I've never seen anything like it.
In 1963, a Malakoff-style stonehead was unearthed, this time while dredging during a construction project along the Rio Grande in south central Texas, nearly 400 miles away. This head was sent to an archaeologist and anthropologist at Baylor University by the name of George Agagino. There the head was examined, analyzed, and photographed, showing very similar facial features to the first Malakoff stonehead discovered in 1929. This head had a mouth, eyes, ears, and a nose. Teeth had been made by drilling into the sandstone.
George Agagino is a world-class anthropologist. You know, he's not going to be duped.
And then the traditional story was, so they're slowly migrating. They make it to the southwest. It's about 11,500 BCE. There's your Clovis man. There's your Clovis Point. There's your Paleo-Indian presence, and this would be, you know, early to mid 20th century. Then what happens is you get these really well-established sites and dates, like a Meadowcroft rock shelter in Pennsylvania near Pittsburgh. It's about, I think it's about 30-minute drive from Pittsburgh, and that site is really tightly dated to 17,000 BCE to 14,000 BCE. There's a definite, what I'm trying to get at is, there's a definite pre-Clovis presence there, and that's in Pennsylvania.
If ancient inhabitants are known to have inhabited what is now Pennsylvania more than 15,000 years ago, is it unreasonable to believe humans lived elsewhere in North America at that time? The team reached out to archaeologist Dr. Tom Guderjan of the University of Texas, who personally examined the Malakoff stoneheads in the 1970s. Dr. Guderjan agreed to meet at the museum to discuss the artifacts and his findings.
My name is Tom Guderjan. I'm a professor of anthropology at the University of Texas at Tyler. I'm also the head of the social sciences department there. So my background is that I'm an archaeologist. And while my research is mostly in Central America, back when I was a graduate student, I was in charge of a archaeological survey along the Trinity River. Well, we spent an entire summer on that project and living here. And of course, you couldn't get far without running into the fact that the Malakoff heads existed and were nearby here, because we'd all seen them. And back then, you could actually read a sentence about them in introductory textbooks from North American archaeology. So what I did was to just go poking. So that was my touch point with this subject.
Did that lead into you getting the gig of doing the examination, or how did that?
I just thought, simply called the Texas Memorial Museum and drove over there and took a look. So that's how that occurred. Yeah, it wasn't a formal project or a formal part of what we were doing, but I had the time to do it, and I was curious enough to do that.
So you didn't have any preconceptions or anything?
For the most part, the archaeological world at that time did not accept that these were man-made objects. So I just wanted to look and see for myself. Simple as that. We finished our field project, and I just took a day and drove from Dallas to Austin and looked at it. Of course, I had to make arrangements in advance, and the curator said, "Let's go. Here you are." And it was literally between two shelving units on the floor, labeled, you know. And it was just face up, and that's I saw it in basically that perspective when I first saw it.
Yeah, let's take a look at these.
Yeah, let's do it.
The divers express concern about the water temperature. The winds are high and the temperature is unseasonably low for this time of year. If the water is too cold, the divers could experience hypothermia. To ensure the diver safety, a remote thermal imaging drone is deployed to survey the water temperature. The decision is made to move forward with the dive, as the water temperature is deemed to be tolerable for the dive team.
Three divers in the water, stand by for descent.
Yeah, just wondering if you guys are planning on.
It's dark down there. Oh my god. I could see Chris when I was kissing.
The lack of discovery by the dive team was disappointing, but not surprising. It's a turbulent lake. It's brown water diving. The sonar from the boat was interesting.
Oh, there's no doubt we were over the quarry.
Yeah.
100%.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was a very turbulent day on that lake.
Yeah, and it may be something we could potentially revisit, but
How can we date this object directly? Let me address that question. Radiocarbon dating requires something have been alive.
Yeah.
And the oldest date it could have been alive is around 150 to 200,000 years ago. But it can't have been fossilized, it can't be a rock, it can't be something like that. It has to have been wood, bone, or some such thing to be able to use radiocarbon dating on it. We have techniques of dating how old a rock is.
Right.
But that will tell you how old the rock is.
The rock is.
If somebody gouges into a hole in a rock or something like that, we can't tell you in any way how old that hole is, if that makes sense.
Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
Good.
Do you think particulate matter from metal tools might still be in some of those notches or cracks and could be detected?
Might be.
Might be?
Might be, sure. That would be a good...
What type of test would that be to...
They blast it with a laser.
Right.
I've looked into it. They blast it with a laser.
Okay.
The laser bounces off.
Mm-hmm.
And cost about $50,000, I think. So.
Yeah, that's what I was told at the time.
Budget?
The Malakoff stone heads have caught the attention of not only scientists and archaeologists, but also artists and poets. Here, renowned Dallas sculptor Eliseo carves in stone his interpretation of the Malakoff stone heads being created by the ancient inhabitants of the area.
This actually has a Malakoff Man poem. Yeah, and written by a really cool guy. I don't know if it's a bad word to use, but I would call it a beatnik hippie type guy.
Oh, yeah?
Really cool, counterculture, 60s type guy.
Robert Trammell, a renowned Texan poet, composed a poem in the 1970s entitled Malakoff Man. Sadly, upon reaching out, the production team learned that Robert passed away some years ago. Adrian Clay, the former spouse of the poet, agreed for his poem to be included in the documentary as a tribute to the great poet and man that Robert Trammell was.
First thing we'd like to hear is what you would like us to know about Robert and his work.
My name is Adrian Clay. Former last name was Trammell. I was the fourth and final wife of Robert Trammell. And when I think about defining his work, I'm often reminded of something that Robert Creeley wrote. It's called A Note on the Local. And just a sentence or two from that. The local is not a place, but a place in a given man. What part of it he has been compelled or else brought by love to give witness to in his own mind. And so Robert was a poet that wrote very much about place. He was a Dallas native. He was a fifth generation Texan. And he believed in his poetry to give voice to place. He was also inspired by winged beings, birds, cicadas, winged snakes, angels. And so all of these images appear in Malakoff Man.
Poems are very personal and very, that's someone's art. That's a little piece of his soul. And so we really wanted to be respectful of that, and which is why we sought out a professional voice person to recite it and perform it.
Down in the oldest part of the bed, they found the heads. One smiles, one frowns, one solves the problem. They would hunt elephants, giant elephants, Columbi, out on the staked plains, on the Llano Estacado.
All right, so it looks like you have amassed quite a collection here. I know.
I am very proud of this.
You've been telling me about this.
A lot of work has gone into this.
So your goal was to try to find as many instances of the mention of the Malakoff stone heads in written periodicals. Right.
Well, can you tell me anything about this?
It's never really fully addressed.
That is an original of a press release. If you flip it over.
May the 10th. 1942.
Anyway,
Old Man Malakoff unearthed on a farm a few miles from Malakoff, Texas.
Okay, this is an art book. East Texas artist has nothing to do with archaeology, has nothing to do with geology, has nothing to do with anthropology. Okay, at the beginning is the Malakoff head. Okay, not mentioned anywhere in the book.
Oh wow!
It's just there. This is my latest acquisition, and I don't know how I tracked it down. What lit the candle on this is it was in Bartlett's store, just a general store, mercantile type thing. It was just on display.
Right.
One of the petroleum engineers saw it and wrote a letter to Elias Sellards, grandfather of Texas archaeology. Document wrote to E.H. Sellards in November 9th, 1929, in a gravel pit 4.5 miles west of Malakoff, where some workmen were excavating roughly carved stone, which upon further investigation proved to be shaped very much like a human skull. Diamond-shaped openings have been carved to represent the eyes, and an attempt made to represent the ears, nose, and mouth.
Sellards was with the University of Texas.
University of Texas.
Gotcha.
And his list of accomplishments are long. But anyway, he was a believer. Now, I don't know to what extent he examined the heads. He believed that they could be up to 25,000 years old.
Tell me about the map, man. You've been telling me about this. My first time to see it.
Okay, so I bought this book for nothing. I open it up. Imagine how I'm feeling, and this flops out of it.
And what year's the book from?
The book is from, I will have to check, but this was done in the 1800s, I believe.
Wow.
Malakoff is it's not Malakoff, first of all, but it's just off of the map.
The gallery that these are part of talks about that prehistoric period of Texas history. In fact, we have a little intro film with a leader of a Native American tribe who says, "My people lived here before there was a place called Texas, and we called it home." And so the whole story in this gallery is, what would it have been like to have lived right here where we are at the college 15,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago?
If you had to describe the Morgado family, what words come to mind?
Nobody, so far as I knew, had anything against the Morgados. They built a lot of things.
But they were pretty solid in the
community. They were solid in their work and everything.
The work's beautiful.
Were they successful? Would you describe them as a successful family?
I would say. Oh, they never did anything out of order or anything. No trouble with them or anything.
If I lived here in 1949, would I have known who the Morgados were? Were they well known?
I think people pretty well knew them. They just lived a normal life like we do, tending to their own business, you know.
So we wouldn't use the word notorious or anything like that about them. They weren't no trouble from the Morgados.
Oh, no.
They're just good people that built up the town and not.
They were no problem.
At school in the 1990s, it was accepted that Meadowcroft Rock Shelter was those dates were 16,000 to 19,000 BP before present were established accepted dates.
What's the accepted oldest or earliest presence? Is it the Pittsburgh site, or is it others? Or
there may have been. We were just talking about this, John and I, a few moments ago, and what I've read about in the archaeological literature. Again, I'm only reading stuff that's not cutting edge pushing the envelope stuff. I'm saying this is an agreed upon date. And the oldest North American site that I recall reading about was Meadowcroft Rock Shelter in Pittsburgh. However, I know that they're finding newer stuff with older dates.
Would it be safe to say that we haven't determined that this shelter or this site or this dig is it? This is the oldest one.
Yeah.
Is it, just a matter of time, in your opinion, before something else is found that says, oh, wow, this is even older?
But yeah, I guess what I want to say is Beringians occupied between 30,000 and 20,000 BC. So it really, the question becomes, how quick was that migration into North America and diaspora, if you will, across the continent? How long did it take?
I just want to take a macro view and say that actually, when it comes to 100,000 years of human history, we know so very little. I mean, less than 5% of the archaeology is done in Mexico, Central America, North America. And we have to remind ourselves that this is a minuscule picture by which we compose. I mean, there is as much to discover about our own history as there is to discover in the future. It's shocking how little we know.
When I saw this at the Texas Memorial Museum in the 1980s, I'm not even sure what year it was, what I was looking for was any evidence of modern modification or weathering on old modifications, that sort of something that would indicate to me whether this was a modern fabrication or an ancient something. So what I realized then is that there are these marks on the exterior, but those could be just shovel marks. Right. I've personally put shovels through too many skulls myself to know that that doesn't happen. There are several little lines inside the eye, one there and one there. On the other eye, it's right down there. And I'm absolutely sure that those were made with a modern screwdriver-like metal tool. Now, does that mean that the whole thing is fraudulent? That it was entirely manufactured in 1929? No, it doesn't mean that. It does mean that I think there's really strong evidence to say that somebody was messing around with it. Now, whether they then did the whole anthropomorphizing of the object, which is they make it look like a person, there's no way to answer that.
So take me down to the river and wash me down. Take me to the river and show me what was there before Dallas, before Indians.
One of those prejudices is early human beings, prehistorical human beings, were proto-rational, proto-intelligent, hunter-gatherers, eking existence out of the cave, right? And for the longest time, pre-Clovis was unacceptable in America.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why is that, John? Why did they not even look? Once they established Clovis culture, they said, oh, we don't have to look any further. Why is that?
Yeah. They like to be right and confident. And hey, look at their archaeological records. As I can't argue with what you just said. I really can't. There's such a dearth of archaeological information that has been retrieved still to fill out the picture. So you picture, you put together those 1,000-piece puzzles, in the archaeological record, and you got like 12 pieces.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
that's
when
right.
you're talking about
a
these
1,000-piece puzzle, we've got about 12 pieces by which we construct history.
Yeah.
So let me argue the other point. That does not mean that because we're missing 988 pieces, right? that we can now just make anything up. Oh, look at this big black space. Let's say the aliens do.
What is your opinion? Authentic, inauthentic, or just don't?
So the question is, did they try to create
that's
a roadside attraction? Do you see what I'm saying? And to try to draw tourists there, I'm not seeing the patina problem on it. Let's put it this way. For me, the question's open. I'm very confident with leaving that question open because there are other heads, and because it's just a Central American phenomenon. The people in the Southwest United States and the Southern United States are getting their corn from Mexico and Central America. That's where they got the corn. So you have all these heads there. You have all this cultural contact there. You got people getting shells from the Gulf of Mexico, and even getting it from the Pacific Ocean. You've got long distance trade going on. I'm not rejecting the idea that Malakoff Head number 1 is a real artifact. I'm saying that it's produced by ancient Paleo-Indians. And
so you're saying not yes, not no, open.
I'm definitely open to it. Again, if you're going to make a hoax, you wouldn't do Malakoff Head number 2. You know what I mean?
Right.
You know what I mean? And there is rock art from dating to Paleo-Indian times. And
these were found in 1929 and so forth, and they were found in a gravel quarry. Well, 1929 to 1935-6 was an important departure point for the National Geographic Society, the National Geographic Magazine, and for Middle American archaeology, which is to say, Nat Geo funded the excavation of the first Olmec sites, and it became a giant success for them. Because what they found, they already knew these big Olmec heads. Even at that time, they were sitting in the downtown square of these towns, as the centerpiece of the whole town. At the same time, people had in mind that things like this might be found elsewhere. So when these were found, they were deeply buried in deep strata, so they were really old. Whatever they are, they're really old. At the same time, a geologist named Figgins had excavated a extinct bison in New Mexico with a projectile point in its side. Mm-hmm. And he was fighting to demonstrate that was as old as it was, which was 11,000 years old. Mm-hmm. So we're having a big fight over 11,000 years. And this stuff's 50? Yeah. Holy moly. So this thing, these objects, came from a place that is basically almost as old as the species Homo sapiens throughout the world. So were there any people in the Americas at that time? Almost certainly, absolutely not.
When you heard, you were there, when Dr. Guderjan stated his conclusion, which is, hey, I looked at these before, I've looked at these now, and in my professional opinion, these are modern day fabrications.
That was not surprising, but you've got to respect his position. He's looking at something that has no provenance. It's completely, hey, a couple of guys found this a long time ago. There's no documentation archaeologically or anything. And he looks at it and it has tool marks on it. That walks like a duck and quacks like a duck to him. I can absolutely see that. To me, there is still room in between two things. We can explain the tool marks and this artifact can be authentic. And I also get the feeling that there's something we missed, something that everybody missed. You always have that feeling, what are we not looking at?
The scientific community and laymen alike are clearly divided when it comes to the age and very authenticity of the Malakoff stone heads. Are the heads from a period prior to the generally accepted time when man is known to have been living in this part of North America? Or were the heads simply a modern-day fabrication, a hoax, if you will? If genuine, then why have there not been many more artifacts from that era uncovered? If a hoax, then for what purpose? While evidence is strong on each side of the argument, only further testing of the heads themselves may hope to bring the debate to a definitive close. Until then, the Malakoff stone heads rest peacefully in their home in East Texas, their secrets undisclosed to those who journey to visit them. Hi, I'm Eric Beard, the voice of the Malakoff Man documentary. Thank you for the time you have taken to experience this film. During production, details were revealed of another possible Malakoff Man-style stone head. The producers were unable to locate the head or its owners, so there was no mention of it. However, thanks to a newspaper article about the documentary, the owner of this fourth head reached out to the Pierce Museum and ultimately Bullhawk Productions. Although production was complete, the team traveled to Athens, Texas to interview Mr. Chris Perryman and examine the stone. The result is this short epilogue, which we hope you will enjoy.
Oh, there it is in that pot. There's carving around on the back of it as well. All that with the three known Malakoff Man heads, and in our family, we've had one since at least the mid-1960s. Was found by a guy that worked for my grandfather, oddly enough, named Jack Griffith. And Jack was a heavy machine, worked bulldozers and drag lines, what we used to call them, that kind of stuff. And he found this, but he was working for a company building the dam at Cedar Creek Lake. I believe you can see a mouth, a nose, some eyes. You can see some work down here lower, and if you spin it around, you can see some feather work on the back side of it, which if you can, there you go. Which you can see.
Here we go.
Yeah, you can see some work there and possible eyes. I mean, it's just what you see. I mean, I don't believe those curves could be done in any way but by somebody working it.